My name is Emily, and this is my story. I live in a quiet town called Silver Harbor, a place where the streets are calm, the cafes are warm, and the sound of the ocean never really leaves you. It's not far from the city, but far enough that life here feels slower, softer, and safer. I'm 28 years old, and I work as a receptionist in a little inn near the shore. My life was simple. Some might have called it uneventful, even dull. But I found comfort in its rhythm. I had a small apartment, a handful of close friends, and a routine that never surprised me. After a few painful relationships in the past, I convinced myself that being alone was better than risking another heartbreak. I wasn't searching for love. I didn't even want it anymore. But life has a strange way of placing people in front of you at the very moment you've stopped looking. For me, that person was Adrian. Adrian arrived one evening for a short business trip. He wasn't like the usual guests who rush through the lobby with phones in their hands and stress in their voices. He was quieter, more reserved, and his smile, it was gentle, almost tired. When I handed him his key, he looked me in the eyes and said, "Thank you," in a way that felt oddly personal, as though the words were meant for me, not just spoken out of habit. The next morning, he came down to the front desk and asked me about the town. He wanted to know where the locals bought their coffee, which path along the beach was the most peaceful, and what place served the kind of seafood you couldn't find in guidebooks. I gave him all my recommendations, and he listened with an attentiveness I wasn't used to. Most people half listen while their thoughts are somewhere else, but not him. He heard every word. After that, our conversations became a routine of their own. In the evenings, when his meetings were over, he would pass by the lobby, and somehow we always ended up talking. Some nights we walked by the shore, our footsteps sinking into the wet sand. Other times we sat on an old wooden bench near the lighthouse, watching the sea glow under the moonlight. We talked about books, about music, about life in the city and life in a small town. He told me about the weight of his work, the endless demands, the exhaustion he carried. I told him about the comfort of quiet mornings, of knowing almost every face you pass on the street. With him, I felt something rare. I felt safe. I felt seen. One night, as we walked beside the waves, he stopped. The stars were bright, the air was soft, and in that still moment, he turned to me and said, "Being here with you, it feels like peace." Those words slipped into my heart and stayed there. That was the night I realized I was falling for him. But, like all visits, his had an end. After 2 weeks, Adrian packed his bags and left Silver Harbor. I thought that was the last I'd see of him. I was wrong. Every day, messages from him appeared on my phone. Every night, we spoke on the phone until I fell asleep with the sound of his voice in my ear. We laughed, we shared stories, and slowly, I missed him more than I ever thought I could. A month later, he returned. But this time, he didn't check into the inn. He rented a small cottage near the harbor and invited me over. We cooked dinner together, we played music, and danced around the kitchen like children. I remember thinking how natural it felt, how easy it was, as though we had known each other for years. I felt lucky. I felt chosen. But then one evening, everything shifted. We were sitting on the couch, mugs of tea warming our hands. Adrian's face grew heavy, and his silence filled the room. He looked down and drew in a breath and finally said, "Emily, there's something I need to tell you." My heart thumped in my chest. His voice trembled as he whispered, "I'm married. I have 2 children." The air vanished. My body went cold. The world around me blurred. He couldn't even meet my eyes. He said softly, "I never meant to hide it. I didn't expect to meet you. My marriage, it's not love anymore. I stay only for the children." I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I walked out of the cottage into the night, the cold air hitting me like glass. The ocean roared louder than usual, and my eyes burned with tears. He followed me outside. "I'll understand if you never want to see me again," he said. I didn't answer. I just nodded and walked home. That night I lay awake, the ceiling above me blurred by the storm in my mind. Why didn't he tell me sooner? Why did I let myself feel this way? And yet, in the quiet moments of my anger, I remembered the way he smiled, the way he spoke, the way he made me feel safe. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to forget him. But the truth is, I missed him. The next day, my phone lit up with a message. 3 simple words that tore through my chest. "I'm sorry, but I miss you." I didn't reply to his message that day, or the day after. For a week, my phone lit up with his words, his apologies, his longing, but I stayed silent, torn between anger and desire, between what I knew was wrong and what my heart couldn't let go of. One evening, as the sun dipped into the horizon, I saw him standing near the beach, his figure outlined by the fading light, his hands buried in his pockets. My chest tightened. Against every piece of logic, I walked toward him. When I reached him, he didn't smile, didn't pretend. He only said, "I've hurt you. I know. But I can't stop caring about you." My voice shook. "You should have told me. You should have given me the choice." "I know," he whispered. "I can't undo that. But Emily, I don't want to lose you." I should have walked away. I should have ended it then. But instead, I stayed. And so began a love that lived in the shadows. Adrian visited Silver Harbor once or twice each month. He always stayed in that small cottage by the harbor, and I would go there after work, the weight of secrecy pressing against my chest. Together we cooked dinner, we shared bottles of wine, we talked about books and dreams. Sometimes we just sat in silence, our hands brushing against each other's, the quiet saying more than words ever could. In those stolen moments, I felt special. I felt chosen. He listened to me with a kind of focus that made me believe I mattered. He remembered every small thing I said, a book I wanted to read, a song I had mentioned once. He made me laugh. He made me feel alive. But reality was always there, like a shadow that never left the room. We never walked hand in hand through town. We never took pictures together. There were no dates, no public moments, no future plans. Only fragments of love hidden in a cottage by the sea. And though my heart craved those moments, some part of me knew the truth. I was not his first choice. I was not the life he returned to. I was only a secret. Still, I couldn't let go. Why? Maybe because I loved him. Maybe because I believed him when he said his marriage was broken. Or maybe because I was afraid of being alone. Nights with him gave me something to hold on to, even if it was fragile, even if it hurt. But slowly, the love that made me feel alive also began to drain me. I found myself waiting, always waiting. Waiting for a message, for a call, for the sound of his knock at the cottage door. I built my days around his visits. I said no to friends. I stayed home, my phone always close, my heart always restless. My world, once wide and calm, grew smaller. It became just him and silence. Sometimes I would stand by the shoreline, watching the waves crash against the rocks, asking myself, is this love, or am I just lost? And yet every time I told myself to wait, to believe, to hope that one day things would be different. But the questions grew louder, the silence heavier. When Adrian visited, the world felt warm. But when he left, the cottage felt colder than before. He never left anything behind. No clothes, no books, not even a toothbrush. Nothing that said he had been there. It was as if he lived two separate lives, and in one of them, I didn't exist. I tried to convince myself that love takes time, that patience was a kind of proof of my devotion, that maybe one day he would choose me completely. But deep down, I knew. Every time he returned to his family, I was reminded of what I wasn't: a wife, a partner, his first choice. And slowly, I began to lose myself. I stopped smiling the way I once did. I no longer read by the sea or joined friends for dinners. My laughter faded, replaced by silence and waiting. My days became a cycle of hope and disappointment, joy and emptiness. One evening, as rain poured down against the windows of the cottage, I sat alone on the couch after he had left. My reflection stared back at me from the glass, tired eyes and a heavy heart. What am I doing with my life? I loved a man who could never fully be mine. I was always second, always hidden. I dreamed of a future, a home, a family, a man who would choose me every single day. But instead, I had an empty house and a phone that only rang in secret. Somewhere inside, a quiet voice whispered, "You deserve more." But fear was louder. Fear of being alone. Fear of letting go of the only love I had. I held on to the hope that one day he would look at me and say, "I've left. I'm here now, only for you." But that day never came. One afternoon, I confided in my closest friend, Anna, the only one who knew the truth. Her voice was steady when she told me, "Emily, you deserve to be someone's first choice. You deserve love that isn't hidden in the dark. Don't let your life shrink to the size of his visits." Her words lingered long afterwards. I realized how much I had changed, how much of myself I had lost. I wasn't the woman who used to laugh freely, who used to enjoy long walks and evenings with friends. I was someone waiting in the shadows, clinging to borrowed time. And deep down, I knew something had to change. The next time Adrian came, he carried flowers, kissed my forehead, and acted as if everything was fine. But I couldn't hide the heaviness inside me anymore. He noticed. "What's wrong?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. I took a deep breath. "I don't know if I can keep doing this." His brow furrowed. "Why now? We've been through so much." "Because I feel like I'm not living my own life," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm living in your shadow. I wait for your visits, your calls, your words, but I'm always waiting. And I want more. I need more." He sat down, his expression pained. "I love you, Emily. You know that. Then why don't you choose me?" I whispered. He looked away. "It's not that simple. I have children, a family. I can't just walk away from them." "And what am I?" I asked softly. "Just a secret you keep tucked away when it's convenient?" He didn't answer. His silence was the only truth I needed. That night after he left, I cried again. But this time it felt different. The pain was sharp, but it was also clear. For the first time, I saw the reality for what it was. He would never leave. Not for me, not for anyone. And maybe that was okay. Because maybe it wasn't about him anymore. Maybe it was about me. The next morning, I walked to the sea. The sky was painted with soft colors, the waves rising and falling as if breathing with me. I stood there, the wind brushing against my face, and I realized something. I didn't need to keep waiting for someone to choose me. I could choose myself. So, I stopped answering his messages. I stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes. I let the silence grow, and for once it didn't scare me. It felt like freedom. The days were hard at first. I missed him. His smile, his voice, the way he made me feel seen. Some nights I cried myself to sleep. But slowly, the weight began to lift. I spent more time with my friends again. I let Anna pull me out of the house, back into the world I had abandoned. Coffee shops, laughter, walks by the sea. I remembered what it felt like to live without fear, without waiting. I picked up books again, stories that made me dream. I signed up for a small writing class at the community center, just to try something new. Every week, I wrote pages filled with my thoughts and feelings. With every word I wrote, I felt pieces of myself coming back. One evening after class, I wandered into a small bookstore. That's where I met Daniel. He was looking at travel books, and when he saw me, he smiled. "Hey, you're in the writing class, right?" I nodded, surprised. "Yeah, I just started." "Me too," he said. "I'm Daniel." We talked for a few minutes about books, the class, the weather. Nothing special, nothing dramatic, but there was something in his voice, something calm and steady that made me feel at ease. The next week, he sat near me in class. Afterward, we walked to the cafe across the street. We talked about simple things: family, food, silly little stories from our lives. He listened in a way that reminded me of how Adrian once did. But this time, it felt different. It didn't feel like a secret. It felt safe. We started meeting more often after class, sometimes just for coffee, sometimes for a walk by the sea. He never asked about my past. He never pushed. He was just there, patient, kind. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in gold, we sat on a wooden bench by the shore. The waves whispered against the sand. I turned to him and said, "Can I tell you something?" "Of course," he said, his voice gentle. I was in a relationship before, with someone who was married. I waited for him for a long time, but I was always second. I don't want to feel that way again. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. "Thank you for telling me. I think you're brave. And you deserve better. You deserve someone who chooses you every day." That night, I went home with tears in my eyes. Not because I was sad, but because for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. Weeks turned into months. Daniel and I grew closer. We walked, laughed, shared dreams. He never rushed me. He never made me feel small. And slowly, I began to see myself again. The woman who laughed freely, who read by the sea, who dreamed without fear. One day, I looked in the mirror and didn't see the broken girl who waited for love in the shadows. I saw Emily again. Strong, gentle, alive. And in that moment, I understood. Love doesn't have to hurt. Love doesn't have to be a secret. Real love is not about waiting in the dark. It's about walking together in the light. Looking back, I don't regret what happened with Adrian because it taught me something I needed to learn. That love without respect is never enough. That being someone's second choice will only break you. That no one else can give you peace. You have to find it within yourself. And now I have that peace. I have hope. I have love. Not the kind that hides behind closed doors, but the kind that stands proudly in the open. If someone asked me today, was it worth it? I would say yes, because through all the pain, I found myself. And in finding myself, I opened the door to a better kind of love, the kind I truly deserve. And maybe so do you. Because if you're listening to this right now, if you've ever felt like you were waiting for someone who could never really be yours, let me tell you this. You deserve more. You deserve to be chosen. You deserve love that is whole, love that is real, love that doesn't hide. Don't shrink your world to fit into someone else's shadow. Step into the light. Choose yourself. Because the moment you do, everything begins to change.